Welcome dear students in the class of MA Final subject English Literature paper 2nd 19th century English Literature. I am Dr. Sumer Singh, Assistant Professor Department of English, Government Lohia College Churu. Today in this class of MA Final English paper 2nd we will discuss about the critical appreciation of the poem Locksley Hall. The poem Locksley Hall is one of the most important poems of Alfred Lord Tennyson, and today we will discuss the critical analysis and critical appreciation of the poem Locksley Hall. First of all, I will present the introduction of the poet, then the introduction of the poem, and then what is the setting of the poem. Then I will discuss the critical analysis or the critical summary of the poem. So in this way, dear students, today in this class we will discuss about the critical appreciation of the poem Locksley Hall. As we know that Lord Alfred Tennyson is the representative poet of Victorian age, and he is also among the most important poets of English literature. As a poet, Tennyson is regarded as the leading poet of Victorian age, and he represents his age, that is the Victorian age, not in fragments but completely. So we can say that as a poet, Lord Alfred Tennyson represents his age completely, not in a piece or fragment. It means we can say that he is clearly a representative poet of Victorian age, and as a poet he is also regarded as the poet of Victorian compromise. I want to clear the point that why he is regarded as the poet of Victorian compromise. It means Tennyson compromised totally with his age, that is Victorian age, that is 19th century, because he wrote about his time and about his place. It means his poetry is totally dedicated to the 19th century, to the period of Queen Victoria, and to his country or to his place, that is we can say England. So Tennyson's poetry is completely related to the Victorian age and Britain or England of Victorian period. So therefore he is regarded as the poet of Victorian compromise. Therefore, the critic W.J. Long calls Tennyson as the most representative literary man of the Victorian era. So, by the critics, he is regarded as the most representative literary man of Victorian era. He may be writing of himself, of his personal joys, sorrows, but even then he writes of his age and renders its chief characteristics. So, we can say that he renders the chief characteristics of Victorian age into his poetry, or his poetry is the manifesto of Victorian age. We can say clearly represents the Victorian age. His works is an authentic epitome of all the important features of his age. Whatever be our estimate regarding his greatness as a poet, and most modern critics are convinced of his mediocrity, there can be no doubt about the representative value of his work. So we can say that his work represent the Victorian age in true sense, and that is the value of his poetry. He is as good a representative and chronicler of his age as Chaucer, Spenser, Pope were of their own representative ages. So we can say that like Chaucer and Pope, Tennyson's poetry is the representation of his own age, of his own time, or we can say that picture of his own time. In his poetry he kept pace with the changing time, or we can say that he also kept pace with the changing time. So the changes are also expressed in his poetry, and Tennyson's poetry is also famous for the lyrical quality or for the description of nature. Tennyson is not regarded as a great poet of nature as Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, Byron, Shelley, but still he is regarded as a nature poet because there is a description of nature and natural scenes and sights in his poetry. So there is a description of nature as well as there is the representation of lyricism in his poetry. Tennyson as a poet is also regarded as a consummate artist, or we can say well known artist in English poetry. Now we come to the point of introduction of the poem. So what is the introduction of this poem, Locksley Hall? What is Locksley Hall? The poem Locksley Hall was written about the year 1835 and first published in the Poems in 1842. So the Poems is the collection of Tennyson's poetry, and the collection published in 1842, and in this collection this poem Locksley Hall was published. The poem is fully expressive of the mood of the poet at the time of writing. So we can say that Locksley Hall presents the mood of the poet at the timing or at the time of writing of this poem. So we can say that Tennyson is regarded as a pessimistic poem because Victorian is also marked with the pessimism, or Victorian age is also regarded as the age of pessimism. So pessimism is clearly reflected into the poetry of Lord Alfred Tennyson, and in this poem the somewhat depression, pessimistic outlook is also represented in this poem, the Locksley Hall, and the Locksley Hall represents the mood of the poet when this poem was written. The poem is fully expressive of the mood of the poet at the time of writing. The whole poem represents young life, its good side. So the poem represents the young life of the poet, or what are the good sides of young life, its deficiency as well as the deficiency of the young life, and its yearning. Yearning means the desire and the wishes of young life. But there can be no denying the fact that the poet's own broken romance with Rosa Bering and the resulting frustration contributed much to the tone of the poem. So the tone of the poem is, we can say, somewhat melancholic, and it is somewhat serious. So the pessimistic tone, the serious tone, the melancholic tone of this poem is clearly visible in this poem, and this melancholic tone or this pessimistic tone is resulted due to the we can say poet's broken heart in the romance with Rosa Bering. So that's the reference in this poem. Now we come to the setting of the poem. That what is the setting of the poem? Locksley Hall is a dramatic monologue. As we know that Robert Browning is regarded as the greatest master of dramatic monologues in English literature, but Tennyson also wrote well-known dramatic monologue, and we can give the example of best known dramatic monologues of Tennyson are Ulysses, Tithonus. So these are the best known dramatic monologues of Tennyson also. And Locksley Hall is also a dramatic monologue in type of poetry. Its speaker, who is the central figure, is a young man who was left as an orphan early in his life somewhere in India. So that is the mention in this poem, that he was left as an orphan in his early age somewhere in India or in any part of India, where his father was killed in a Maratha battle. So it is supposed that his father was killed in a Maratha battle in India, and at that time the speaker was a young child and he was left as an orphan. So it is the mention, or it is the setting of this poem. He was then brought to England and was brought up at Locksley Hall. So Locksley Hall is a place, or we can say it's a majestic building, and then the child was brought up to Locksley Hall, and he was reared there. He was developed as a man there by a tyrannical uncle. So his tyrannical uncle brought up that child in Locksley Hall. Locksley Hall is an imaginary place, and it's an imaginary majestic place. It's a imaginary castle, and the utmost that can be said is that is it must have been situated near the Lancashire coast, and it can be said about the place of this building that is situated near the Lancashire, and the situation of this place is near the Lancashire coast. The wild setting of the hall records well with vivid wildness of Lincolnshire, because Lincolnshire is a sea coast, it's a beach, and the wildness, or we can say the description of the natural scenes and sites also described in this poem. So the setting of this poem is the sea coast of the Lincolnshire. Now we come to the critical summary or the critical analysis of the poem. It was at Locksley Hall that the speaker fell passionately and violently in love with his cousin Amy. So the speaker falls in love with his cousin named Amy. He loved her truly and devotedly, but she didn't prove worthy of him. So this is the we can say that the tragedy of the speaker or the central character, that he loves his cousin Amy very passionately, violently and devotedly, but the response from his cousin is not, we can say, proper, and that response is not up to the love of the speaker. Overawed by the threats of her father and persuaded by the wise maxims of her mother, Amy, the cousin of the speaker, agreed to marry another who had gold, but who could never love her as he loved her. So due to the pressure of the family, or due to the pressure of the parents, Amy agreed to marry with the another person who is a rich person, who has a lot of gold. So we can say that Amy, under the pressure of his parents, under the pressure of his family members, agrees to marry the another person, but the another person does not love as much the speaker loves Amy. So this is the tragedy in this poem. Frustrated and despairing, he left Locksley Hall to go out into the wide world. As the poem opens, we find that the speaker has just returned to the scene of his love after a lapse of years. He asks his companions to leave him alone for some time, and when alone indulges in this long monologue which gives us a peep into his soul and bring out all the bitterness and frustration with him. So as we know that the poem is a dramatic monologue, and in a dramatic monologue, speaker speaks about his ideas, about his planning, about his thought, and in this way we find a chance to peep into, to look into the soul of the speaker. And in the same way, in this poem the speaker is also frustrated in his love, and therefore he says to his companions that they should leave him alone, and he meditates in his loneliness. He speaks about his frustration, or about his failure in his love. So that is the situation in this poem. The impression that we gather of him is that he was once a noble, adventurous youth who could have done much in his life, but frustrated love has wrapped and twisted his personality and turned him into a prig, boastful, blustering, vain and concealed. So we can say that it is told in this poem, and we get the impression in this poem that once upon the speaker was a very adventurous youth and he could have done much in his life, but due to the frustration in his love he could not do anything in his life, and now he is totally a man of vain, and his personality is twisted, and his personality is totally disappointed, and he is in a pessimistic mood. So we can say that the frustration and failure of his love turned the way of his life totally in the different side, or in the different direction. There was a time when he was young, when he nourished his fancy on sales of science and had full faith in progress and the wonder that would be. It was the spring of his life. We can say that young age, when he was a very adventurous person, when he was a very we can say good man of fancy and imagination. So that was the spring life of the speaker. And in the spring, thoughts naturally turns to love, or in the springtime naturally thoughts turn into love each and every person. He loved his cousin Amy, who at once reciprocated his love, saying, I have loved thee long. So at the beginning, the person gets the response or gets the good response from his love, Amy, but later on the situation changed due to the pressure of the family member of Amy. For some time they were all to each other. It was the golden time of life with them, but the romance was soon shattered. Cousin Amy proved shallow-hearted. So he presents a epithet or a title, shallow-hearted, for his beloved Amy, because she proved shallow-hearted due to the pressure of her family members. So the lover says that she proved shallow-hearted, falser than all fancy fathoms, and slavishly agreed to marry another. And slavishly agreed to marry another, it means due to the pressure, Amy surrenders and she agrees to marry the another person rather than the lover, a person much inferior to her in intelligence, and the person is much inferior in intelligence to Amy, but Amy surrenders herself due to the pressure of her parents, and she agrees to marry the person who is far inferior in intelligence, in culture, refinement. So we can say there is no match of Amy and the person to whom she is going to marry. But what can Amy do? Because it is the pressure of her family members. The speaker's heated imagination. So we can say the speaker's heated imagination carries him off his feet, and he fancies to himself the married life of Amy. So due to the pressure of frustration, the speaker again comes into the we can say mood of optimism, and he revives his hopes and he dreams about the married life with Amy. So we can say in his imagination, in his dream, he starts to enjoy the married life with Amy, because in reality he cannot marry Amy. The another aspect that is presented in this poem, that is the cynical attitude of the speaker towards womanhood, because the speaker, who is the central figure, and he is frustrated in his love, then he says that women are weak, they are of we can say submissive nature, and so many epithets he uses for the weakness and the submissive nature of womanhood in this poem. So that is the cynical attitude, but that attitude is presented in this poem. So womanhood, the cynical attitude. Frustrated at the faithlessness of Amy, and with a deep indignation burning in his heart, the speaker rails and fulminates not only at womankind but on the corrupt and degenerated times as a whole. So the speaker comments in a very indignation, or we can say the speaker comments in a very we can say negative way, that not only Amy is of submissive nature, and not only womankind is submissive, womankind is weak, but the time is also as a whole also cruel to the happiness of a man. He says that the time is also degenerated time, the time is also we can say that negative, or we can say adverse to the happiness of a man. So in this way, in this poem, the pessimism of poet also expressed through this speaker. Cynically he calls women the lesser man. He says that woman is a man, woman is a human being, but woman is far lesser than the man in quality, in bravery, in boldness, because a woman easily surrenders before the adverse situations. A woman easily surrenders before the compulsion of her parents. So he says that a woman is lesser than a man, with weaker passions, and passions of a woman are also weak, guided more by irrational impulse than by reason. So he makes a comparison between man and woman, that man is guided by reason, by wit, talent, whereas woman is guided by the irrational impulses. or we can say by the emotions that are irrational, and she surrenders before any pressure and compulsion. They are weak. He says that women are weak and shallow buried. They allow themselves to be bullied by their parents into marrying moneyed fools. It means women are easily surrendered. They are, we can say, persuaded by the pressure of society to marry with the moneyed fools, or we can say that rich fools. In their turn, compels their own daughters into obeying such prudential maxims as were their own undoings. So parents, through the we can say that prudential maxims, or through the several type of guidance, they make their daughters, make their children to obey their own desires. So in this way we can say that women are weak, they are submissive, they are of surrendering nature, and they easily make a compromise with adverse situations, whether the pressure of society or whether the pressure of the family members. Disgusted, the lover decides to mix with action lest I wither away. So in this way the lover is in the mood of, we can say, depression and in the mood of pessimism in this poem. And now we discuss the language and diction, that what is the language and diction, or what are the imageries used in this poem. The poem has achieved immortality not for its depth of thought, because depth of thought is always, no doubt there is, but for its cluster of golden phrases, the sheer delight of imagery, diction, cadence which it provides in such ample measure. A number of lines from the poem have passed into common, everyday and household proverbs. To quote only one or two examples at random, so we are going to quote the 2 or 3 examples of the beautiful everyday household proverbs that are used in this poem. First, knowledge comes but wisdom lingers. Very important maxim, very important household proverb, that knowledge comes but wisdom lingers. Second, woman is the lesser man. It means this is the comparison between male and female, and the poet, being a male, finds himself more bold, more adventurous rather than his love Amy, or we can say that he wants to prove that women are lesser men, they are we can say weak in their power. The third, not in vain the distance, not in vain the distance. So such lines ring and swing, they are firm, epigrammatic, because the quality of these maxims, the quality of these lines is epigrammatic, and these lines are memorable because they are full of knowledge, they are loaded with common sense. So these lines are also used in this poem. So the language is also important, and the language expresses the pessimistic mood, or the we can say that the failure of poets in love. It has been said that poetry lives by its imagery, or we can say that poetry becomes immortal, poetry becomes long lasting due to its language, imagery, use of symbols, etc. So that's the language of this poem. Now we come to the point of conclusion. So now we will conclude the poem. The poem Locksley Hall, that was published in 1842, expresses his ambivalence about technology and scientific progress. So technology and scientific progress is also mentioned in this poem, but that can't provide the satisfaction or the solace to a depressed person. There the speaker feels tempted to abandon modern civilization. So he says that I want to abandon modern civilization, and he wants to live alone and return to a savage life in the jungle, and he wishes to go to in a jungle, and he wants to live a very alone life, as we can say that Wordsworth says in his poem, the world is too much with us, and he wants to become a pagan. So in the same way he wants to be a man of jungle. In the end he chooses to live a civilized life, no doubt in the end he chooses to live a life of civilization, modern life, enthusiastically endorses technology. In the end, the poem affirms both religious faith and faith in human progress. Eventually, however, he believes that, or the speaker believes that, common sense will prevail. And lastly, the speaker comes to the conclusion that in human life there is a great value of common sense, and common sense prevails always. And a parliament of men, and a parliament of men means a man of common sense, a man of knowledge, a man of wisdom will prevail, will survive in this world, will be created in peace. He predicts the decline of the importance of the individual and the rise in the importance of the world as a whole. So he says that he predicts, or we can say that he says in advance, that there will be the decline of the importance of individualism, and there will be a rise, there will be the rise of importance of the world as a whole. So society is more important than the individual. He comes into this conclusion at the last of this poem. So in this way, dear students, today in this class we have discussed, or we have critically analyzed the poem Locksley Hall, written by Tennyson, and we can say that Locksley Hall is one of the most important poem of Tennyson. So for today this is sufficient, and in the next class we will discuss the another point. Thank you very much for today.